On this week's episode of the Training Box Health and Fitness Podcast, we're talking about dealing with social pressure when trying to lose weight and playing the long game when it comes to dieting. With my special guest, Precision Nutrition Level 2 Master Coach Instructor, Dominic Matteo. You're not going to want to miss this episode. But if you haven't already, before you can jump into the episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below so that way you don't miss any future episodes of the Training Box Health and Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Training Box, the show that interviews the top experts from the world of fitness, nutrition, and health as they share their stories and expertise to help educate and inspire you to live a healthier life on purpose and with purpose.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Training Box Health and Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Box, and I'm joined today by Dominic Matteo. Dominic, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephen.
So just for those who do not know you, tell us what your official title is.
That's always a tricky question at PN because we don't really have titles. So I am a level 2 Masterclass instructor. That is kind of the main role that I fill at Precision Nutrition currently. So I coach the level 2 certification, which is a year-long master's course in coaching, essentially. I still have other responsibilities within the company. I do a little bit of business analysis work. That was my previous life before I started coaching full time. So I still get to flex some of those muscles a little bit. And I own partner content. So our curriculum, I should say, things that when we work with our partners like Nike and Equinox, I do kind of spearhead a lot of that work.
So you're just kind of all over the place, a jack of all trades, as it were.
Kind of. I have a lot of range, but again, like I said, my main focus is coaching the certification program. When I first started with PN, I was coaching the men's program. I did that full time for a few years, and I still have a handful of my own coaching clients outside of PN, but not many. Simply because I try to keep all my focus in the main space, which is the cert.
Yeah, it sounds like you already got enough on your plate without taking on a whole bunch of clients.
Right. I like to keep a handful, right, just so I can keep my own axe sharp, and stay in with the process. But that's about it. I don't do too many.
And just for full disclosure, I actually am an L2 graduate, and you were actually my coach for L2. So I've actually gone through that program.
Yes, sir. Yes. So you know all about it.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because people will always ask, well, what's the difference between the level 1 cert and the level 2 cert? And I'm like, it's not even comparable. Like, that's not even like really a question because it's not even in the same ballpark. It's not even the same animal. It's so different because you actually just go from learning the science of stuff and a little bit of coaching to really learning how to coach people and more the psychology and change and things like that. So we'll definitely be talking a lot about that today, I'm sure, since that's kind of your area of expertise.
Yes, sir.
So let's start with your story a little bit here, because you have a unique perspective from the standpoint that you have a weight loss story. So you've been on the client side of things. You have been, and still, coach people. I believe you told me before that you actually were just a personal trainer at one point. You didn't do the nutrition stuff just yet. You were just training people. So you've been there. You've seen what it's like to add the nutrition component to it.
Yeah.
And now you coach coaches. So, right. So really you could just have this whole, perspective that most of us don't get because you've seen this thing from every angle. So kind of walk us through starting with your own personal weight loss story.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things I always feel very, very lucky in general in my life. I've had like I said before, I had a lot of range, a lot of breadth. I've had exposure to opposite ends of the spectrum in various spaces of life. For example, technically I'm an only child. But my father's been married 3 times. So I've been the youngest, I've been the oldest, and I've been an only child. I know the perspective of all three of those positions. So I've had a lot of these kinds of occurrences in my life, and the ones that you're bringing up here. At one point I was well over 300 pounds. I'm not a tall guy at all by any means. I'm 5'7" if I'm lucky on a tall day. So being over 300 pounds at 5'7", it is not the most healthy space to be in. I went through a weight loss process there and ended up losing at the most. It was over 120 pounds. I got down to, I think it was probably in the range of, I think it was like 175 at my lightest. And I was in single digit body fat there. I play rugby, so I walk around usually now sometime, anywhere between 185 and 205 pounds. So went to, being really big to being the most unhealthy person in the room to being the fittest person in the room. So I've seen that perspective. And in that process, you learn quite a bit. And so I try to use that and keep that in mind in my coaching whether I'm working with my clients or other coaches like yourself, to see that perspective. There are things that happen that we never really think about. And I can tell you from that experience myself, and, even the experience of, hey, when people started noticing they wanted me to train them and going back to school and starting to learn more on the nutrition side and then doing more nutrition coaching and all of that evolving over the last 10 years. The thing that I realized the most is, we need to play the long game more, which people don't tend to do. And it really is about consistency. And this is why I tend to want to play the long game with people and try to get them to see that. The only thing that really matters is consistency over time. Your approach doesn't really matter. What matters is, are you going to be able to be consistent with it? That's more important.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you first started to lose your weight, what was there like a single moment for you that kind of made it click, or was it just something that ate at you over and over again that finally just kind of boiled over?
That's a great question. And, when I used to get this question before, I would always immediately answer like, yeah, because there was a defining moment that really kind of pushed it over the edge for me. And that was the day that we found out we were having a son. It was the same day that one of my best friends died. He had a pulmonary embolism and passed away. That kind of clicked it for me. Like, hey, I need to be here for my son and my kids. I mean, this was my first child. And if there were things that I was doing that might have jeopardized that my role as a father, and I was like, I need to take care of that. However, before that started, I was still I was doing things, right? So the journey started before that. That moment, though, is what really kind of laser focused me into being able to say, okay, I have to really take control of this. So prior to that, I was training pretty hard. I was playing rugby at the time. And I still do, but I was trying to get fit for rugby then. So you can imagine being that heavy, playing a game that's, lactic aerobic. I mean, you're running for 80 minutes essentially. So it was something I was prepping for physically. I wasn't paying attention to the food. I was training hard 6 days a week. I lost a little bit of weight. I was getting fitter, but my body wasn't changing too much. And then when that event happened, then that's when I realized, hey, eating a double bacon cheeseburger isn't really going to cut it as my protein portion for the day. So I should probably dial this in. And then I did.
Now, when you talk about dialing that in, because I know earlier you mentioned one thing that you would like to see people do more is to focus on that long game instead of just the quick results. So I know a lot of times when people think, okay, I need to make this switch, it goes from I'm going to eat the double bacon cheeseburger to all of a sudden they're trying to get like a grilled chicken sandwich with like no condiments on it at all. and it's just like this dry, disgusting thing. Like I don't even want to eat healthy
Right.
anymore.
Right. And that's very good, right? There's a continuum, and this is a huge sticking point for a lot of people. People tend to think all or nothing thinking, right? Like I'm either doing the thing or I'm not doing the thing. And it's like that's not really how life works. There's a continuum. There's a gray area there. I didn't go from eating, double bacon cheeseburgers with mayonnaise and fries and shakes to, chicken breasts and dry potatoes and broccoli, which I rarely would eat now. Unless
Confessions of a
seasoned
broken trainer.
properly, made to taste delicious, which most people don't do. It was a slow process. It was slowly changing things. So we actually have an article on the PN site that kind of went through this with me. And there's an infographic there where you see that burger. And then the next step, I stopped drinking soda and started drinking water. And then, I started opting for, a salad instead of the fries. And then maybe it was, hey, if I want the fries, maybe I don't have the bun and maybe I don't put the extra cheese on there. And so just slowly over time, that meal evolved into a more appropriate meal to eat frequently. Let's put it that way. Because I still will eat a double bacon cheeseburger once in a while. That didn't fall off the radar. It just got reduced in frequency drastically. And that took time.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a similar story. And when I was losing my 80 pounds, people are always surprised when I'm going back and I'm detailing what that process looked like. And they find out that I actually still ate fast food on a regular basis for about the first 40 pounds of that loss. And they're like, wait, how you lost 40 pounds still eating fast food like 4 or 5 times a week? I'm like, I was making better choices. I didn't say I was making the best choices in the world. I just said I was making better choices. So
That's
I was
amazing.
consuming less calories.
That's such a powerful example, Stephen. That is such a powerful example. And again, right, it's the continuum. Like, what is the best choice I can make here? Or what's even just a little bit better of a choice I can make here? And fast food isn't necessarily a bad thing. People hear that and they think it's like a bad word. And sometimes that might be your only choice, right? For convenience, or, that like you might be stuck in an airport, who knows? But you can still make good choices in those situations, which you did, right? I mean, we see examples of people doing very similar things all over. We wouldn't have all these diet books out there, these different kinds of diets, if that stuff wasn't true. I mean, there's a cookie diet, there's a Twinkie diet. Remember the guy like Morgan Spurlock when he did Super Size Me?
Yeah.
Someone came out after him and ate McDonald's for 30 days every day like he did, and they completely changed their health profile to a healthier one. He did the same thing, but that guy actually just paid attention to his choices and made better choices, still eating McDonald's the entire time, and he improved his cholesterol, lost weight, all that stuff. The opposite of what happened to the other guy, right? Super Size Me, he ate the fast food, didn't pay attention. The other guy ate the fast food, kind of made better choices, better outcomes.
And it's funny you mentioned the pay attention, because I know that is a huge thing with PN, is all about creating awareness. Yeah. And for a lot of people, when they want to lose weight, or even when they want to gain muscle, the idea is it's all about food and it's all about exercise. It matters what kind of exercise I do, matters what I eat. But the way that we think about food, the awareness we have around what we're putting in our mouths, those things have just as big of an impact, if not a bigger impact, than the actual foods. Because like what you just said about McDonald's, I mean, by just being aware, you have one person lose and actually improve their health, and another person became very unhealthy because they were just cramming food in their throat.
Yeah. That's awareness. Awareness is always a great place to start. I think a lot of us lack that. I mean, that as well. And it's not a thing that I say, oh, it's your fault. I mean, we all have control, but it's our environments, if you live in North America, we live a technologically enhanced life where some things are easier because we have technology, which may not necessarily be the best thing for our health, right? So there's that balance. Convenience, technology helps. It helps us in general with our life, but it also helps us sometimes not be so aware, which is where these other things start falling off. So being aware of what we're eating, how we're feeling, the way we think about food, the way you brought it up, it's a big deal. And that actually leads into kind of the philosophy and approach that I have in general and that we have at PN, and it's a skill-based approach, which is why I like people to play the long game and explain to them. If you have a goal, you need skills to acquire the goal, right? And you know, as a trainer, that to acquire skills, you have to practice, right? So if you have health and fitness goals, if you have a fat loss goal or whatever it is, you need the skills to acquire that. And a lot of times people don't think of things that way. They don't think of it as a learning process or an awareness process. They just think of it as I do a thing or I don't do a thing. And that's why results are fleeting if they exist at all for a lot of people.
Yeah, you know, an example I've given people in the last couple of years here is this idea when you talk about the skill building is imagine doing a bicep curl. Well, everybody knows how to do a bicep curl. You just pick up the weight and you curl it, right? And it's not a complicated exercise. It's probably one of the easiest exercises that you could ask somebody to do. But if I just say do a bicep curl, you don't know how many to do. You don't know how much weight to lift. You don't maybe understand how the range of motion should look. You don't understand the little things like taking your pinky finger and turning it this way a little bit to get the maximum contraction at the top. There's all these extra skills that you can develop around the simple concept of pick up, lift, you know, and it's something that's so simple and it's so easy that everybody goes, well, I know how to do that. But if you don't have all the skills, you may not get the most benefit out of it. And I think a lot of times people end up in that same position when it comes to food because we know what we should be doing for the most part, and it feels super easy. So we don't understand why we're not just doing it, and we think it's willpower.
Yeah, that's a great point. Where that's actually one of the most common things that we hear in our coaching programs. When people come into our men and women's coaching programs and the intake, one of the most common things, I know what to do, I just have trouble doing it. Or I think I know what to do, I just don't do it, right? So people know in general that they should eat more vegetables and fruit, more plants. People know in general that, you know, a bag of chips probably isn't a great idea for dinner. Now, how they end up in that space is the thing that gets discounted, right? That's the piece that you need skills. You need skills in being able to put those things into action and move the other things in your life out of the way so you can do the things that are important to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned the moving other things out. I remember one of the things that I saw, I think we went over, it might have been in level 2 or it might be one of the Pro Coach programs that because I use PN's Pro Coach software in my coaching. And the idea is that you can't say yes to something unless you say no to something else.
That's in all of our programs, that one.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like I've heard it a million times. It's kind of beat in there at this point. So,
yeah.
But it's interesting because, you're just saying that like, hey, you got to be able to move some stuff out of the way. And I think that one place that people maybe kind of overlook is before you commit to a change, you have to ask yourself, what am I not willing to give up? What am I not willing to change? Because you can't have something that you want to hold on to getting in the way of what you're trying to change if they conflict with each other.
That's one of the best I think those are some of the best questions to ask right up front with a client. Like, hey, what are you not willing to give up here? Right? And then you can, as coaches, we can figure out, is this really going to be a problem or can we work around this? In a lot of cases, we can, like your McDonald's. I've had clients that don't want to give up things like ice cream or cookies. Saul Orwell of examine.com is a great example. I think he lost 40 pounds, maybe 50 pounds. I think they did a little profile on him in People magazine a couple of years ago. But he ate cookies every day. He loves cookies. and if I remember correctly, it was chocolate chip cookies. But he ate cookies every single day in that process of losing 40 or 50 pounds because he just made better choices all around them because he wanted to keep them. He was not willing to let go of them, but he still made it work. So it's not all or nothing. It's choosing what are we willing and not willing to get rid of and figuring out how to move the pieces around that.
And I'm actually going to back up on that because I think that's one of those things that if people were just kind of like listening in the background, they might have missed, and they might not be able to process that or it might have just blown their mind and they might need a recovery period here. But think about this fact that you can go and still have your cookies. You don't have to actually say, I'm going to get rid of cookies from my life in order to see results. And so many times what we end up doing is we restrict and then temptation kicks in. We have a moment of weakness. We overdo it. Then we beat ourselves up and we quit. So by actually saying, I'm going to eat cookies every day and acknowledging that and then finding a way to work that in, you actually give yourself more freedom, not less.
Yes, 100%.
Which is kind of weird because it's the exact opposite of what everybody thinks.
Right. That is kind of like the paradox. Structure creates freedom. In a lot of spaces, and people don't recognize that.
So yeah, that's definitely something that I want to make sure that people heard, because I think so many people do get caught up on restrictive diets and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So going back to when you had your weight loss, was there things that you didn't want to give up, or maybe, even since you obviously weren't with Ken at the time, you maybe didn't know this whole process at the time. Were there things that you tried to cut out that kind of backfired on you, some of those early lessons you learned?
Yeah, that's a good question.
If you can remember at this point.
Yeah, no, I remember very clearly. There were a lot of things that really stand out that were kind of like, I'm glad I went through it now because it informs my coaching, but in that process, it didn't make sense. So I didn't keep like a cheat day or anything like that. I didn't do any of that. I honestly, I didn't even weigh myself. I got on the scale like once a month, maybe. My biggest goal was just to be there and do the best I could with the things I outlined that I needed to do for a year. Like that was my goal. Like I'm going to be here a year from now doing the same things. So some of the things that I struggled with, I know when I initially started, like dealing with carbohydrates was an issue for me. Trying to figure out what an appropriate amount of carbohydrates was, what appropriate carbs for me were at that time. Going from more refined to more whole type foods as I progressed was actually difficult at some point. And it's not because the food isn't good or because that food, some people think, health food isn't good. No, it's not true. I mean, it's delicious if you prepare foods properly, which is a skill. The thing that I struggle with was when you're going from a lot of refined food to more whole foods, the volume of your food goes up. Okay, so being a larger guy, trying to eat the amount of intake I needed to support my physical activity and my size in clean food was a massive amount of food for me, coming from eating, very very calorie dense food. So when you go from think like, fatty beef and cheese and like bacon and stuff like that on a sandwich, like a cheesesteak with mayonnaise and double cheese and double meat, which was like my go-to, right? You go from that to now you're eating, a 4 or 6 ounce like lean steak and a baked potato and some veggies and that kind of stuff. Maybe some fruit for dessert. Like the volume of food doubled, and so that was difficult for me, quite a bit. And
I can actually relate to that.
What's that?
I said I can actually relate to that because for me, it wasn't that I was trying to actually double my portions. I went kind of the opposite. My portions were still the same size, and these, leaner ingredients, they weren't as filling. And so, there was a period for about a month or so where I'm like, man, I am starving all the time. And it took me a while to kind of figure out, hey, I got to bump up the portion sizes here. I had to get myself out of that mindset that it was okay to bump it up because the food was not as calorie dense. So I could bump up the portions. But until I figured that out, man, I was starving.
Yeah. Yeah. So you probably had a pretty big cut right up front. So when I came in there and it was like, oh, this is way too much food, this is never going to work for me. How is this? I felt gross. I felt bloated all the time. I started paring down the food, and then I ran into that space where I'm like, well, I'm hungry all the time now. So it's like, I had to figure that out, where that balance lived, for sure. What other things that were difficult to give up, or just to reduce for me? I mean, really, ice cream was a big one. Sugar stuff. I didn't eat any added sugar for a couple of months at one point. That was towards the end of the process as I was trying to get really, really lean. Like it became like I had to get meticulous with what I was doing, because I was already, at the point where I couldn't just do general stuff and get any leaner. Yeah. So that was difficult. But again, that was a very specific thing that was time boxed. I knew it had an end to it. So it wasn't something I was like, I'm never eating sugar again. It was not like that. It was, all right, for the next month and a half, I'm doing this, and I know it's going to end in a month and a half from now. And then I'm going back to sanity, if you will.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing when a lot of people look at, the idea of a lot of these diets, they kind of have that same approach of, well, I'm just going to do this for, a couple of weeks, get down to whatever weight, get ready for whatever event I have. And there's nothing wrong fundamentally with that idea of doing something short term to get to a specific result. Mm-hmm. But where a lot of people run into an issue is at some point your body stops allowing you to get the results that way. Like when we're younger, our bodies tend to adapt and we lose the weight and we're good. I'm 41 this year. I've seen it firsthand, man. Like as you go through your 30s into your 40s, all of a sudden your body's just like, no. And I'm sure it's going to only get harder as I get older here. So you can't just keep relying on those quick tactics. At some point, you've got to really get those fundamentals down, right, to see the results. And then every now and then you can dial it in to get extra lean or whatever. But
that's not what most people do, right? I mean, like you said, I think where a bigger failure that happens there for people is, yeah, you might go on a diet and follow the directions for a short period of time, make some results, but it's like, then you're done. What are you doing now? And people don't go back to a baseline of good skills that maintain their healthy approach, right? They just go back to eating ad libitum, whatever they want, which is how they got there in the first place. I know that's how I got there in the first place.
Yeah, me too. But I know one thing, a lot of my clients that I deal with, because a lot of them live here in the South where I live, and food is part of the culture, and especially family. And I know you've said in the past, like being Italian, your family food is very big in your culture, very big part of that. So what was that like for you? Did you have a good support system? Did you run into some issues with that when you were like, hey, I'm not going to eat this today? Or
yeah, that's a tough one. That's again, a really good question, right? So this is like one of those things as I was going through that in this process up front, I told my family, hey, this is what I'm doing and why. At my house, I sat down with my wife and told her, I need your support. I can't do this without you. I want to make these changes. These are the things I need to do. So we talked about the food that we ate in our dinners and how we approached them in our shopping. And her and I kind of came up with an agreement there. She was tentative at first, right? Because she thought like, oh, are we just going to eat like cardboard now? Because I don't like that. That was a legitimate concern of hers. She thought that we were just going to eat terrible food. Plus at that time, I did all of the cooking. She didn't have a whole lot of cooking skills then. So that was intimidating for her as well. But in that conversation, we kind of level set, decided we started slow. We picked recipes, we cooked things together. Now she does most of the cooking, and she's very supportive in that space. with the rest of my family, I told them what was going on, what I was doing, but we would be at family events and, I wouldn't eat certain things. And you would get the comments just because people don't know. And I don't get mad about it, but some people do, say things like, oh, you can't eat that because you're healthy now. Or, oh, you're eating that. I'm surprised. Like, it's right. Again, their own judgments and thoughts around what's healthy and what's not. So there was some education there. Like, no, I still eat that stuff. And I still get that once in a while too. Like, oh, you probably don't eat that. I'm like, man, I eat everything. I eat what I like. If you look at my Instagram, I post the foods that I eat. Like, I eat the same foods, but I make them taste good. Like, I'm not eating diet food here. Diet food. Like, I don't like that. I like food, man. Food is part of my culture. It's part of our family. This weekend, Saturday, I spent all day Saturday making homemade sausage with my cousins. They're drinking homemade Italian wine that we made. Yesterday I made sauerkraut and ginger beer with my kids, right? So like food is a part of our lives and things that we do.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you mentioned, how you get those comments. And I actually, when I first started going through it, when I was around when I was around my friends and we would go out to eat, and I would order something that was, say, on the less healthy end of the spectrum, they would make those comments. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, when I was literally shoveling food in my mouth and I was ballooning up, and I got up to 245 myself. So, and we're about the same height. So, that's, not small. Mm-hmm. So, at this point, I'm pre-diabetic. I'm literally killing myself and no one has anything to say about it. But yet, as soon as I start trying to be healthier and I'm trying to make better choices, now all of a sudden you want to judge when I don't eat well? Where were you when I was killing myself? To say, man, maybe you don't need.
Right? That's human nature. It's the crab bucket mentality almost. You see someone crawling out of the bucket and they want to pull you back in. And it happens. It's going to happen. I've seen people comment on social media, like, you shouldn't say anything about people, and that's true, but people do it anyway. So if you're in this process, expect it and know it's not about you. It's about that person. It's their own reflection. That's all it is.
Yeah. And you can't control other people.
Nope.
No matter, and we can make all the posts on Facebook we want about, be nice to people, don't criticize, don't do this. People are going to do what they want to do. So it's better to teach people, who are trying to make these changes, how do you deal with it?
Right.
It's going to happen. So how do you deal with it?
Right.
And I think that's really where the key is. And then it's what you said earlier. It goes back to skills, because learning to handle that conflict, learning to manage that, especially when it's people you care about and people who care about you, and they're saying something because they generally think they're helping you. Those conversations can be hard to have. So it's a skill to know how to deal with those situations and not fracture those relationships.
Right. Absolutely.
So that can be a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's an opportunity to educate. Hey, thanks for being. I'm always cordial. Hey, thanks for taking an interest. I'm working on I'm working on my healthy eating skill set here. This is what I'm doing now. And that's it. Move on.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's all. Because if you try to explain to people or defend or whatever, you're gonna go down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. Just thank them, acknowledge that they noticed, and explain what you're doing and move on. And that actually is helpful in some cases, because it'll pique if there's someone who's really curious because they want to know for themselves, if you don't vomit your enthusiasm on them or defend what you're doing, it will pique their interest, and you'll actually help pull them out of their own hole and want to take action for themselves as well.
Yeah, it can be amazing just how much of a difference just simply just acknowledging someone and not getting defensive about it, how much of a difference it can make in the way they react. And a lot of times I think what people do is they get built up in their head this story about what's going to happen. Oh, if I tell my mom that I don't want to eat her, world famous whatever, or I'm not going to eat 3 plates of it, I'm only going to eat 1 plate of it, then she's going to, fall down on the ground and hysterically begin to cry. And, the reality is, your mom's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't have to eat 1.5 pounds of spaghetti every time I eat it. Like I don't need to do that anymore. Like I can have a nice regular cupped handful size serving and whatever else we've got and be happy and move on.
Yeah, it's funny, we talk about the food because on a previous episode, I was talking to somebody before we actually started filming. So this wasn't on the show, but we were having a conversation beforehand. And the conversation of alcohol got brought up, and neither one of us drink alcohol at all. And we were saying that we both found this to be a situation where we found it more socially acceptable when you're out to just tell people that you are a recovering alcoholic than it is to actually tell them you don't drink alcohol. Like the reaction from people is actually, if you go, I'm a recovering alcoholic, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have offered, my bad, I wasn't thinking about it. But if you just go, I don't drink alcohol, well, why not? Have you ever tried it? Maybe you just haven't found the right, drink yet. Have you tried this? Did you do this? What about this?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's alcohol is always an interesting one there for sure.
So it's just, but it goes back to that same thing we're talking about with the food, where, people, a lot of times they just make assumptions, and just simply just acknowledging and just say, no, this is what I got going on, is usually enough to satisfy their curiosity, and they move on.
Yeah.
Whereas if you attack back, then, that just leads to, a whole nother thing.
Right. That's not a path you want to go down.
Yeah. Holidays, avoid, religion, politics, and diets.
Probably pretty good advice in general.
If you want to keep the peace anyways, right?
Sounds like my Facebook feed. That's why I don't go on there anymore.
You're like, I'm avoiding this.
Yes, pretty much.
Oh, man. So real quick, tell me, in terms of the transition from you losing this weight, becoming a trainer, and then training other coaches. What are some of the similarities that you've seen between, the trainers who, because a lot of people may not know this, but Precision Nutrition actually gets a fair number of trainers who go into their coaching programs for body transformation. So what are some of the similarities that you see between trainers, people who actually know how to exercise, they know what they should be eating, they know all this stuff, and the general public? What are some of the similarities there?
It's the same thing usually. When you heard me talk about skill sets, I feel like all of our basic eaters, if you will, have to have the same skill set. And sometimes you may have the skill set, but other things get in the way. So you'll hear me say like the thing before the thing. So a lot of times what I see people, the similarity of what happens between a trainer that comes through the program and, just a general population person that comes through the program, it's your identity and values. It's the other things that you're doing that take up your time and space. And recognizing that the perfect program does not exist in a vacuum. It's all contextual. So perfect for you, not perfect on paper. So if someone writes up this is the perfect training program, I have to train 6 days a week. Well, if you got 3 kids and 2 jobs and you're a single parent, you're probably not going to have time to train 6 days a week. So what's realistic for you and what fits? Do the best you can there. So helping level set is that's a constant across all populations there. Trainers, regular people, even in the level 2 program, right? In the certification, it's a year long. It's pretty intense. You have case studies. You have to stay on top of your work. It's like taking a master's degree course. And a lot of coaches or trainers come in with a lot on their plate. And it's like, okay, how are you going to make time for this? And that is usually that's the biggest thing. figuring out how to make things fit in the context of your own life. And it's not just nutrition or exercise, right? That's everything. Like what's important to you.
Yeah, and I think one thing that might surprise a lot of people, and I brought that up specifically because I want people to see that even people who do know what they're doing, because it's always, like you said earlier, people always feel like, if I just knew this, if I could just find the right diet, if I just knew this. So even trainers who know all this stuff still struggle sometimes with our own stuff, even though we know what to do.
Right.
Professional athletes, people that, have these amazing physiques, this amazing physical ability. I mean, some of them honestly have the worst diet habits in the entire world. They're just lucky that they have such great genetics. But I've trained several people who were former athletes, either at the college or professional level. And, I'm talking even just 2 years removed from them playing. They're in horrible shape because now all of a sudden they're not working out every day. They don't have somebody pushing them. They don't have all this extra free time because, people are asking them to do something other than just practice and play a sport. And now they're like, I don't know what happened. I've ballooned up 50, 60 pounds and I'm terribly out of shape. And what happened? So even professional athletes, people you would think have this all together, they struggle just like everybody else.
I think our professional athletes in some cases end up in worse, like they're in worse shape, in a worse situation. Right. A lot of times they become professional or elite, like you said, because of genetics. So in spite of what they eat and how they train, I've seen some really, really good high level athletes that have terrible training programs and terrible diets, but it doesn't matter because they've won the genetic lottery. And then to that point, like you were talking about the people removed for 2 years, like if your job is to play sports and train, when that is no longer your job, do you think you see yourself as a healthy person that does fit activities, or, right, do you see yourself as a former athlete? There's a difference, right? So it's like the one does the things because that's how they get paid. And then as soon as that job ends, then they stop doing the things for their job. And now they have to relearn those skills, or learn those skills and how to make it a lifetime thing.
Yeah, it's a new skill set for them.
Correct.
So
100%.
Well, Dominic, I really appreciate you coming on today. Before we wrap up, I like to do a lightning round of 3 questions with all of my guests.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask, just tell me the very first thing that comes to your mind for each of the questions. Cool?
Let's do it.
All right. Question 1. Someone comes to visit your town. So tell us where that is. And then tell us, what do they have to go eat? What's the food place they have to go to?
Okay. This is going to be I'm going to give you a 2-parter on this one.
Okay.
So I live in a suburb of Cleveland. Okay. I live in an eastern suburb of Cleveland called Painesville. I should have been a professional wrestler. So in Painesville, there is a little Mexican grocery store that's got a cafe attached to it, where you get like fresh handmade tacos and stuff. Like the guys are back there sorting the beans by hand. Like you can watch them before they cook them and refry them, all this stuff. La Mexicana, I would say, yeah, if you're out on the east side and you want a little hidden gem, you'd eat there. But if you're just in Cleveland in general, I would go to one of Iron Chef Michael Simon's spot, like Lola Bistro for sure. Or, Lolita closed. So Lola, yes.
Okay.
Or Mabel's, that's his other restaurant, which is a barbecue place.
That's a very diverse menu choice between the same person.
Yeah, well, it's all kind of, there's a lot of pork products with a lot of Michael Simon stuff. So yeah, Lola's got some Italian things, cured meats, a lot of pork things, and the barbecue place. But yeah, he's an Iron Chef. He's a local guy. It's really good food.
Must be nice to have an Iron Chef nearby.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Well, if I ever find myself in Cleveland, I'll definitely do that because I guess about 8, 9 years ago, I came up to Canton for the Hall of Fame,
Okay.
and we went through Cleveland at one point, and there wasn't a whole lot. So, um,
Depends where you go.
I mean, not compared to down here in Atlanta, anyways.
Oh, no.
All right, so that actually will lead to my next question. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Anywhere in the world. Probably, I probably want to go to the Fiji Islands. I know there's some little like resort type places where you can go live in a hut on the beach for a week. I'd like to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's gorgeous there, and it just disconnected, just living the beach life. I'm happy to do that.
just live the beach life. It's funny because I'm actually originally from Pensacola.
Okay.
And everybody's always like, "Oh man, that must be so great growing up so close to the beach." I'm like, "Yeah, it's great when you don't grow up next to the beach. When you actually live there and you can go all the time, you're like, the beach is crowded. I don't want to,
Right.
So I want it like a private island. Is
right. That's what I said. The Fiji Islands, they're like, those places are not packed. That's not a packed place. That's like, you have the whole island's yours.
All right. So this last one might be a hard one to answer. If you could pick only one person to follow on the whole internet, so social media, Google, whatever, get one person that you can follow, who is it? Doesn't necessarily have to be fitness or nutrition. Just
that's a tough question. One person. If I gotta get rid of everybody except for one.
My name's acceptable as an answer, by the way.
What's that?
I said my name's acceptable.
Well, it's like, well, what's important? What would I want to be entertained looking at? It's not a person. It would be if I had to just get rid of everything and I could only follow one thing, I would probably go right to Foul Language, which is a comic book strip on Instagram. it's parenting.
Okay.
Whenever I'm having a horrible day, or if like my kids are just being kids and testing my boundaries, I'll sit in my office and pull out one of those books and read them, because then it's very cathartic. So I would keep following that.
Okay. Hey, you got to know where your values are, what's important to you. So
yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, real quick, what's going to be the best way for people if they want to follow you or contact you? If you're the person that's on their list of the one person they can follow.
D Matteo 77. So DMATTEO 77 is my Instagram. I'm most active there. You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, Dominic.Matteo. Yeah, those would be the best ways. I don't usually, the stuff on Twitter is posted out of Instagram, so Instagram's probably the best place to go.
Okay, and I'm glad you just said that, because I just realized I've been mispronouncing your name for like 3 years now.
No, this is an interesting one. So some of my family members will be upset. Americanized, our name is Matteo, and that, like, a lot of my family says that, but really it's supposed to be Matteo. So.
Okay. So according to some of your family, you're saying it wrong and I'm right. That's basically what you're telling me.
Yeah. It's like that whole thing when, when the Italians came here and they tried to blend in a little bit more, so they changed a lot of their names or just had them changed for them. This was one of those cases.
And if there's any coaches out there who maybe they're intrigued by this idea of the level 2 certification through Precision Nutrition, what's the easiest way for them to find the information on that?
Go right to precisionnutrition.com and go take a look at the articles. There'll be stuff in there.
Okay.
The best information would be there for sure.
All right. Any closing thoughts? Any final piece of wisdom that you want to pass on that maybe we didn't get to talk about?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of close out with just a couple of big points to remember. Play the long game with yourself, and with your clients if you're a coach. Keep in mind there is a continuum. It doesn't have to be right or wrong or this or that. There is a continuum of things that are going to move you towards your goals faster and things that'll maybe not move you towards your goals at all. And that doesn't necessarily mean those things are bad. Have a little self-compassion and know that it is a skill building process. If you think of things as learning and skill building, you're always going to be moving forward. And that's the most important part.
That is some excellent advice and a great summary of all the things we talked about today. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like, comment, share. Make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you want to stay in touch with Dominic, make sure you follow him on his Instagram. And I will also post a link to that in the description as well. So that way you won't have to remember it. You'll be able to actually get to it. And I will see y'all next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.